Hi, folks, and welcome to the 24th episode of the Vitor Vicente podcast. I'll be sitting with Jonny Blair, a Northern Irish travel writer based in Poland. Jonny visited more than 100 countries, and he has a lot to talk about those excursions. I have the feeling that some of the stories might include beer and football. So there is plenty of stuff to hear from the man himself. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Express your satisfaction with a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in a sec. Hi, Jonny. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Vitor. Nice to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, great. So let me just say this as a starting point. Like, typically when I talk to people are very jealous that I've been to 66 countries. But now that I'm talking to you, I think I'm on the other side of the table, because you have been to more than 100, if not 200 by now. So it's my time, to be envy. Yeah. So I would like to go through all these journeys and see what happened. I'm sure there are some juicy stories to share with the audience. So looking forward for that. So what drives you to travel this much? And not only this much, like you also have the tendency, which is something we share, to go to remote places. Some of them people never heard about them. So what is it about?
Yeah, so I mean, it all started when I was a kid. You know, when you are at school, you take an interest in subjects, what you have. My strongest subjects were always English literature and geography. Geography was probably the biggest one when I look back, because I grew up in Northern Ireland, which has English as its language. So for me, it was easy to read English and to read English poetry, English books. As a kid, I loved writers. I loved reading what they had to say. But ultimately, it was the geography that gave me this idea to go global, because, I got a map. My parents bought me a map. It was on my bedroom wall when I was a kid. And it had all these countries on it, with the borders, when you see like Chad, Sudan, Vietnam, Malaysia, and you're looking at the map and going, wow, what would that be like? Italy looks like a foot kicking a ball, Sicily's like a ball, and it looks like there's a foot of Italy. And I thought, how amazing would it be to visit those places? But of course, in the 1980s, when I was growing up, nobody had any money to go and travel, and I certainly didn't. And so the first thing would have been seeing the world and learning a bit about geography at school. But apart from that, it was also football, because I watched the 1986 World Cup. It was the first World Cup I remember, and Northern Ireland were actually in it. There were 24 teams in the World Cup in those days, and I had a sticker book with every country. I could name all those countries. So I had a dream one time to visit all of those countries. So I've done that now. But I also had a dream to sort of live that 1986 visualization of what I thought the country would be like, so I was looking at South Korea, for example. I could see that the guys looked a bit different. They had stranger names like, Gu Bong Si and Xiu Zhongwan and Huang Yang So. And I was thinking, wow, what crazy names. Can I go to South Korea and actually are people different? And of course they are, because they have different names, different cuisine, different culture. So getting the sticker book of football made me get fascinated by the country, the flag, the language, the culture. And then, of course, as I grew up, the geography and the English language stayed in me through my teenage years and through my career and my jobs in university life. So it all started when I was a kid, probably the same as you, Vitor. Yeah, when we're young, we look at maps, right?
Yeah. Actually, I'm already fascinated, because I'm also crazy about maps. And as a matter of fact, like we moved, like myself, my girlfriend, and my cat, we moved to this apartment 2 months ago. We bought it. Finally, we bought a place. I'm from the year of '83, so finally we made the decision of buying a place. And I wanted to give him it the sense of home, obviously, but
Mhm.
also some traveling elements. So
I
there were a
can
few
see the
things.
globe behind you. I can see that.
Yeah, the globe is there. That's one, but there are
Yeah.
a few others that are not visible now. So one I have here on my right hand side is a wall with 9 canvas. Okay,
Yeah.
and we just put them yesterday, which is a big coincidence. And what are those 9 canvas? Are the cities where I lived,
Oh,
including
wow.
my
Yeah.
hometown, that I
Brilliant.
want to carry them with me wherever I go. And
Hmm.
at the entrance of the apartment, we put a big map because, like yourself, I just get amused when I look at the
Yeah.
borders, when I look at the strange names, and it's already traveling just looking at the map.
Yeah, I mean, in 1986, as you know, the world was different. So my original atlas, there are a few countries on there that don't exist anymore. So, for example, Union of Soviet Socialist
Mm.
Republics, the Soviet Union, USSR, it was one country on my map. So, in 1989 to 91, when the breakup of the Soviet Union, I started to use my pen to edit the map. So I remember drawing the border of Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Kaliningrad, and then I've realized, oh, Turkmenistan,
Mm.
Kazakhstan, they're all separating. And suddenly I had like 16 or 17 countries in an area before I had just one. Um,
Yeah.
and and then, of course, I was so curious about, will they have their own football team? Will they be in the
Mm.
Olympics? Will they have a capital city? And of course, they have all that. They've got flags. And it was such a crazy time. Yugoslavia did the same
Yeah.
situation, with Croatia now, such a strong nation with, like, football and sport, and they're really passionate, country. But before, it was just part of Yugoslavia. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole fascination after that was just mega for me.
Yeah, yeah. So football was also an opener for me, and what happened was like my father was very much into gambling, not in
Hmm.
the not like we do it these days with likes of Paddy Power and Ladbrokes, but more like you have a list of matches and you need to guess the result. And let's say if
Yeah.
you get 10 out of 13 or 10 out of 12, then you get some money. If you get 8, you get a bit less, and so on and so forth. And there was this newspaper at home called 1x2, a Portuguese newspaper.
Hmm.
And that was one of my reading materials, even for me
Yeah.
to learn how to read. And every week there were these matches from all over Europe, uh, and I would learn so much about cities that most people, like even at our age, they never heard of,
That's
even
the same thing to
even
me.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It
go
happened
on.
to me because you would look at the name of a football team and
Mm,
then you would check which country is it in, like Olympi Ljubljana. So I
mm,
remember thinking, where is that? And then I find out, oh, it's in Slovenia. Where is it in Slovenia? Well, it's in the capital. And then, you might go into school and tell people that, and nobody's interested
yeah.
because there are certain people that get that and certain people that don't. And I was more like a black sheep, I would say, for my family and maybe even at school, because I knew things that other people didn't know at school, but that meant that I didn't listen, during mathematics or something I wasn't interested in. I didn't really care about it. I focused on, geography, probably a bit of history, and especially the language. I did a bit of French and German, and now I do a bit of Polish to try and get me a bit more culturally aware. Is when I started to travel.
So how was your experience, let's say, when you made it to one of those cities like the likes of Ljubljana or some? Let's focus in Europe just for this exercise. And you remember that when you were, let's say, 8 or 10, you heard about them, and finally you were there, and you could see it with your own eyes. So, what was the sentiment?
Yeah, it was so different to these days, because these days people just go on YouTube or they go on,
Mhm.
Facebook or Wikipedia. They get a photograph. It's like if someone's going to, let's say someone's going to Minsk next week, they just go online. They have a look what museums to see, what places to see, what does it look like? Oh, there's a nice square, Victory Square. Let's go there. But for me, it was always like I didn't have the means to research. My research was from a book. And when I started traveling, the internet wasn't massive. There was no social media at all when I started traveling. So I guess it was more magical in those days because you didn't have an expectation. You would arrive in some place and go, wow, I didn't expect it to be like this.
Yeah.
And some of the places in Europe, like I would say Paris is probably the worst example for me, because it was exactly what I expected, because I'd seen it so many times. So I turned up in Paris and I'm like, oh, it looks like that. So there's the Eiffel Tower, Cathedral Notre Dame, Montmartre, Sacré-Cœur, Champs-Élysées. It's like, didn't blow my mind at all. And then I go somewhere that was not well publicized, like let's say maybe Almaty in Kazakhstan, or Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. And when I got to those cities, I was just, those blew my mind a lot more, because I'd never seen a photo of Bishkek until I got there. And, you know, it's got all these old monuments. It's got these kind of pokey little markets. And that was something that you can't research that and watch a YouTube video and get it. You have to go there. With Paris, you can kind of get a little bit of the vibe before you go. So for me, it's always the places that are less written about that are the better ones for me.
So can we say, or is it fair to say that surprise and discover are key elements when you go and explore places?
Exactly. Of course, I do like to do a bit of research. I mean, these days, I will always research a city for the top sites, maybe top bars, restaurants, food, etc. Of course, I will do it. But I find it better when I get to a place and something shocked me that I didn't see online. I didn't have any expectation of it. And it always happens in places with less tourists, to be honest. You could go to Barcelona, and yeah, there's some great buildings in Barcelona. We know that. It's a cool city. We can't say it's not. But in terms of, if you want to be like, shocked by somewhere, instead of going to Barcelona, go to like Conakry in Guinea, which is the capital city, and you'll be the only tourist in a church, right? If I go to Barcelona, I'm one tourist in a queue with 3,000 waiting to get into a church. In Conakry, you just walk straight in. In fact, you might even have to ask the minister of the church to open the door. All these little experiences that the less tourists there are, the more I feel that I'm the coolest tourist here. Whereas the rest of the time, I don't want to just be one of 20,000 people in the same place,
Yeah. It totally resonates with the way I travel. Like, I don't mind explore places that are already taken by tourism. I think sometimes we need to go there. There are, as you said, that museum or that event, and then you stay there for like a short sightseeing. That's fine, but it's not the same fun. Like you cannot compare. Go to a place where, as you said, you are just a rare species. That you stand out as someone who was not from there, and they are not used to that. It's very unusual. It's even hard to put in words, but it's a fun. Maybe it's not everyone's fun, but it's a fun that some people can experience, and we cannot, we cannot replace it with going, as say, to the heart of Paris or another city. I would say similar to Paris is Rome, where everyone goes to those 3-5 sites, and you can see everything online, especially now with Instagram. And like, I think you also recall the time that you go to a place and there was no GPS, there were no smartphone.
Yeah, of course.
You had to rely on the map.
I still love the physical maps, though. If I'm in a hotel or a hostel, I'm the first person to take the physical map, and with my pen, I then start to tick off where I want to go. If I find a nice bar or restaurant, I write where it is on the map. And then there might be someone in the same dorm room as me, and they've looked at me and said, "Why did you do that? Just go on Google Maps and pin it." And I'm like, yeah, but it's not fun for me, Like, what if my phone has no battery? Or what if I want to have my phone at the same time as I'm using this physical map where I'm writing on it? So I still love maps, and I get them when I can, and I write on them.
Yeah. So you've been to remote places, and I'm sure you experienced some crazy stuff. So is there any story you want to share with people that, will fascinate the audience? Something unique. It doesn't need to be in a remote area, but is there any story that you would be willing to tell?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's one. I'll tell this one to start with, because this is one that it sounds like it's more touristic than it is. But have you been to Ethiopia before?
No, I haven't been.
Okay,
No.
so I'll tell you a story from Ethiopia. And I'm actually quite surprised that the story I'm about to tell you isn't more touristic, right?
Mm.
But there's a city in Ethiopia called Harar, and it's Harar. So it's not the same as the Zimbabwe one. The Zimbabwe one is a different spelling. So Ethiopia has a city called Harar, and it's not very far from the border with Djibouti and Somaliland. Yeah. So when you're in Ethiopia, the roads are terrible. It's the first thing. So it's really hard to, using public transport, which you do, is difficult from city to city. And not only that, but because of the amount of accidents on the roads, at night, they don't have enough lights. So sometimes you can't travel after like 1 a.m., like from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. Sometimes they won't let the bus go. So one night I was in Addis Ababa, which is the capital. Yeah, quite a lively capital, quite a cool place. And I stayed in a really good hostel there. And I said to the guy in the hostel, how can I get to this Harar city? And he's like, that's going to be tough because for a start, you've got to get a night bus. And secondly, you've got to find the night bus and hope that they change buses for you in another city called Dire Dawa. So I was like, okay, well, let's risk that. So I left my backpack in Addis Ababa in the hostel because the plan was to go to this place and then come back. Now, the reason I was going to Harar, well, actually two main reasons. First reason is I heard that at night, every night, you can meet hyenas on the street and feed them. Yeah, face to face, mouth to mouth. You can touch them. You can be with hyenas. And these are
Wow.
wild hyenas that have been tamed by like the locals or something, right? But they're wild hyenas. And I thought I'd seen some other travelers' videos and photos of that, to be honest. And I thought, well, that's something I need to do. I want to write it on my blog and I want to see it. The other reason is, Vitor, Harar is the fourth most Islamic city in the world. And people really are shocked by that because Saudi Arabia obviously has a lot of Islamic cities. The Middle East has loads, but Harar in Ethiopia is the fourth one. And it's official, So I went to do the mosques. So my idea was I'll go to Harar, I'll do the mosques and the tour, and I'll do the museum, the art gallery in the daytime. Obviously with good coffee because Ethiopia is excellent with coffee. And then at night, I'll go and feed these hyenas. Now, this is like, for me, this is like a bargain thing because the guys that help you to feed the hyenas, you only pay them between $6 and $10, which for me as a traveler, it seems very cheap.
Yeah.
But that's the price. And they think they're getting good money for it, which they are. And they're excellent at it. So basically, you'll meet these guys on the street at Harar at night, just before sunset, when you're hanging around in the market and you're white. Let's be honest. If I'm white, people know that I'm a tourist, right? There were only, in fact, I didn't see any other white people there until I met the hyena man. The hyena man, you pay him and he takes you to the edge of the city where you meet the hyenas. But at that point, there were four of us tourists. So there was two guys from the Netherlands and a guy from Canada and me. So just four of us. We paid our money and we sit down and the guy starts whistling, right? And we're sitting there and then we just suddenly see all these hyenas come out. It's brilliant. It's just blew my mind. And they're not vicious. They're not coming to attack us because they know that we've got food and that's their master. This guy is like the hyena man. And so it came to someone's got to feed them. So the master does it first. And then he says, who wants to go? I'm like, me, I'll go in. So I'm straight in there. And the good thing is I did this only 12 years ago or 11 years ago. So I've got photos of it. If I did that 20 years ago, I'm only telling a story. Now that it's on my blog, I've got the story, the photos, the video. You can see that the hyenas, like, just I'm feeding it like that, mouth to mouth. So I've got a stick in my mouth with the pork, and then the hyena comes and grabs it and eats it, and then it jumps on my back, and you can kind of touch it. So that I thought I'd share that one with you because I hope that people listening will want to do it. If you want to do it, just Google hyena in Harar. And it's an amazing experience, and it's cheap as well. And it's a bit of a trip to get there. I think it's 12 to 14 hour trip from Addis Ababa, maybe. Maybe I was lucky I got it a bit shorter, but it's a long trip.
And how is the trip? You go by public transport,
Yeah,
or
it's a
you
packed
just
minibus.
hitch?
Oh, it was one of the worst, to be honest. It was one of the worst buses I was being. I thought I was going to die on the bus because the bus is shaking like that, and
Mhm.
I'm the only tourist at the back, and I'm like sort of hemmed in like this with, a goat here, like melons here. You're carrying the food for the other people that are, they're taking that to their business. But they're all really nice. Ethiopians are a friendly bunch of people, which is great. And they're very chatty. They love to talk to you. So the trip was made easier by the fact that I could talk to them. But the bus journey, it was like a minibus for 15 people, but there were about 20 of us in there. They overcrowd it just to get the money and take you. So the journey there was not the easiest, but it was worth it when you get an experience like wild hyenas, something like that.
So when you travel, you also write, or you are that kind of travel writer that first you experience, and once you are back home, wherever is your home, or if you have one, you write. So what's your process like?
My process is both of those because I know there's a system where people think, oh, I want to write about Cambodia, and then they go to Cambodia and then they write about it, and that's it. That's great. I sometimes do that, but what I like to do is do a bit of that. So like think, like where did I go last? I was in Cameroon. I went to Cameroon and Gabon, and where was the other country I was in? Sao Tome. So that was my last three big countries I was in. And before the trip, I thought, well, in Cameroon, I want to watch football. In Gabon, I want to go to the beach and watch the sunset. And I also want to test the visa system because it's a difficult visa. And then the other country, Sao Tome, I wanted to relax by a beach, tour the bars, have some food and drink, and go to the equator. So I had an idea before what I wanted to do. But after that trip, I realized that I have so many more stories, that things that are unexpected. So when you're there, your writing changes because I originally wanted to write about watching football in Cameroon. I still haven't written that because I did other things in Cameroon that were unexpected. I did a pub crawl. I did the art gallery. I stayed in an old, like a hostel that looked after the people from the ships coming in.
Yeah.
So I am a writer of blogs, social media posts, and books, but all of those can change. I guess with most writers, you have a plan, you start it, and then things change. Nothing is anyone that's a concrete writer. That if its plan goes the way they wanted, then it's not for me. I don't think I've ever done that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, the surprise element. So that's also part of writing. Like you need to bump into something you are not expecting.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think there is something wrong about the creative process. Like you might have the upper hand in the story, but there will be some elements they are not up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the word is spontaneous. Like the best stories I've ever written are the ones that I didn't expect. Like you maybe have a plan to go somewhere and then something changes when you're there. Like I was in Guinea, in Conakry, at the end of 2023. Now, I arrived on a Tuesday morning, but on the Monday morning, there was an explosion where about 60 people died. And on social media, everyone was saying, oh, you can't go to Guinea now. Don't go to Guinea. It's so dangerous. Get out. Nobody will be welcome. And I arrived in Guinea, in Conakry, when the explosion was on, and it was brilliant. I had an amazing time. And I wrote about best 6 things to do in Conakry when there's an explosion, which before that, my plan was to write about watching the sunset from a bar or something. And then also I had to wear a mask. And it was like I was wearing a mask. So I put the photo on like Facebook or Instagram. And then people are commenting going, oh, is COVID still on? I'm like, no. It's an oil explosion. It's the smoke from the explosion. And my hotel manager came down and said, here's a mask for you. And I was like, the mask? And he's like, yeah, you need to wear a mask because I was going to the danger zone near the explosion to get a boat, you see. So that trip, I could not, in fact, nobody could plan that trip because something went wrong. it's like writing about the Titanic going to New York. So imagine a writer had a dream. I'll write about this beautiful ship going, in fact, going from Northern Ireland to England to France, then to Cove or Queenstown in Ireland, and then going to New York. And then the ship hits an iceberg and sinks. His story changes. Yeah. So for me, my story always changes. And those are the better ones. Always, right?
Yeah. 100%. There must be something there that you're not thinking of, as you said. Otherwise, it's not really appealing, and you might get bored of writing it if you are just carrying on with what you were thinking of. There must be something there that you don't know what it is, and you need to deal with that on the spot and make the most of it. That's how I would describe. So at the moment you are in Northern Ireland just visiting family, but you decide to settle. I don't know how much settled you are, but for individuals like us, it's hard to say. You are settled in Poland. Was there a reason for you to settle in Poland?
Actually, this is a really long story. I released a book. People kept asking me about that. Why do you live in Poland? And I get confused why they ask me, because some of the people that asked me were also not living in their home country. So I said, well, why do you live there? And then they say, oh, it's a long story. And I said, my story is a long story as well. So people kept asking me, why do you live in Poland? But they thought that I had moved from Northern Ireland directly to Poland and just went like that. But of course, that journey is not how it happened. So because I was fed up with people asking me the question, what I did was, one day I sat down and thought, that's an easy book to write. So I wrote a book called I Went to Gdansk with Somebody, which is obviously stolen from Whitney Houston. God bless you, Whitney, because her song was I Want to Dance with Somebody. So I took that idea. I went to Gdansk with somebody. And then the story is how a Northern Irishman ended up in Poland. And then that gets people thinking, and then they might want to read it. So the first thing is, obviously, there's a story out there that explains it all, but I can tell you quickly right now how it happened. In 21 years ago, I decided to move to England to study. And I'd done some journalism course in English literature, European history before in Northern Ireland, and had passed that. And then I got into the Bournemouth course in England. So I moved to Bournemouth, and I didn't realize that Bournemouth is such an international city at the time. I didn't realize that, well, actually it's a town. They call it a town, not a city. But I didn't realize that in my second job there, which was selling ice cream, I would be working with people from like 20 different countries. So I would go into work one morning, go, all right, mate, where are you from? And be like, oh, I'm from Poland. I'm from New Zealand. I'm from Canada. I'm from Brazil. I'm from Guinea. I'm from Argentina. I was like, wow, I'm international. I'm meeting all these people. So during that job, I made sure I kept in touch with all those people. Like in those days, you'd probably get their phone number, their postal address, and probably an email that maybe bouncing back now. Some of those guys that I got the email of, if you email them now, probably they've got a new email. So it's bounced back, 20 odd years ago. So once I built up all those contacts and I lived in Bournemouth, I got my degree. I went traveling to like China, Malaysia, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South America as well. And on those trips, I was working for a bit and then traveling for a bit and blogging while I was traveling, right? So my first country outside, so I went Northern Ireland to England, and then when I lived in England, I would do the France ferries. I worked on the boat going to France and back, and then I decided to backpack through Asia and go to Australia because I don't know, I thought I was still in my 20s, so I thought I can still make a bit of money in Australia, and maybe I can make enough money to travel. Through that, I met more people, and I later ended up studying Spanish in Uruguay because I'd been a dream since 1986, to go to Uruguay because they won the first World Cup. And when I got to Uruguay, I was just so amazed, and I was thinking, I need to stay here. So, whether you say, did I live there or not? I stayed there to study Spanish, and I stayed with a local family in Montevideo. And that gave me this idea that, that's the first time I'd lived in a country that isn't native English speaking, because I'd only done Northern Ireland, England, and Australia, and I realized that I prefer the countries that don't speak my native language, because it's the only time I'm pushed a little bit to learn something new. So Uruguay gave me Spanish, and then later I met a Chinese girl. I ended up in Hong Kong for a few years. And a lot of my friends over the years were Polish, from my previous jobs. And I'd always liked Poland anyway. And it was a case of going back there. So I ended up back there on a trip, and I just split up with a girl from Hong Kong I was living with. And that was the time when I was sitting by a beach thinking, I've spent 5 years with this girl. I said I was going to write a book. I haven't written it yet. And that it was on the beach in Gdansk that I've decided I'm going to stay here, write the book. And then I met another girl, as you do, right? I mean, this is what happens when we travel. You meet people, you become attached to people, you fall in love. So that the whole Gdansk thing was a mix of a love story and the need to be in a non-English speaking country, and the need to be in a country that I love. It's cheap, it's fun, it's friendly, it's happy. And Poland is perfect for me at the moment. And it has been now for 7 years or something. That's a long version of how I ended up there. There's a lot more complications. That's why they're in a book. The book is 301 pages that I needed to do to explain that. But it is how that was, that's my journey to Gdansk.
Yeah. So you touched base on something that it's quite interesting for me when I talk to English native speakers, is how you guys find yourselves when you are abroad, because you have this advantage that you can speak English and most times you can find your way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's say if you want to learn the language, it's more difficult because people who always speak English, or they always try to speak English. So even if you are really interested, you have this barrier that we don't, let's say. So how do you see the whole thing that the world in general speaks English for someone like you who travels a lot and likes to mingle with others?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, because actually I've done a lot of podcasts and interviews down the years, and people rarely ask me that. I don't even think anyone's asked me it. So I think it's a brilliant question, because it proves that you understand the situation very well here. And what I would rather be you than me. I would rather be a Portuguese guy that is traveling and I know Portuguese, but I don't know English yet, because English is easier to pick up when you travel, because the medium language is English. So if a Spanish guy meets a Slovakian girl, they don't speak Slovakian or Spanish normally. They start with English. If a Chinese guy meets a Brazilian, they normally go straight to English. So it's kind of, for me, you're right. It's easy for me to travel because every airport in the world has the local language and then English. Almost, I can't even remember an airport where there wasn't English. Even it says toilet and departures, arrivals. So vocabulary wise, English is everywhere. It's good for the globalization, but it doesn't allow me an easier access to speak it. So I'm glad you understand about that. If I was from Portugal, what I would like about being Portuguese, I will tell you, is I would love to be, if I grew up in Portugal, I would make a point of going to like Brazil and the Portuguese Caribbean and Angola and Cape Verde and Mozambique and East Timor. I would love to do those Portuguese colonies as a Portuguese speaker. So you will always be able to do that. And I can never experience what that is like. That lovely bit of, let's say Macau, which is in China, but they can speak Portuguese. And that's a beautiful thing, actually, even though colonialization, ultimately people didn't like it and it didn't always work. But it did give the world language and a little bit of kind of history to cling to. So English-wise, it's easy. I go to Australia. It's easy to get a job. It's easy to work. It's easy to make friends for me there. But part of me is jealous of you and jealous of any country where a person grew up with English as not even the second or third language, possibly. You know, maybe, I don't even know, maybe Spanish is your second language. I'm not sure. What is your second language?
That's it's my time to say. At this point, it's very hard to say what is my first, what is my second, or what is my third. Like, I
Wow.
speak three languages
Yeah.
fluently, I believe: Portuguese, Spanish, and English.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
Portuguese, I think Portuguese will always be my first,
Mhm.
but at this point of time, for instance, I dream in English, and that tells a
Yeah.
lot,
Wow.
because I'm
I've
not
dreamt in
choosing.
Polish before. That was my, like, I was like,
Mm.
wow, I had a dream in Polish. It happened about 3 or 4 years ago. First, it's the only other language that I kind of like these days, and I can speak a bit, because I studied German and French. Didn't really like them. I do use it when I go to those countries, just in a restaurant or cafe, just to be polite. But I can't have a deep conversation in those languages. And Portuguese, I'll be honest, I find it difficult, just because it's harder than Spanish, in my
Yes.
opinion. And I wasn't also that good at Spanish when I was in Uruguay. I think my best Spanish experience was in Mexico. It was quite, I was able to communicate a bit better for some reason in like Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico than I was
I think
in
it's the accent,
Spain.
because they have
Right.
a soft accent, and they are very
Right.
used to English native speakers. And maybe you were talking Spanish, and I'm not judging,
Mix
but
of English and Spanish, probably.
yeah, or you were thinking in English and putting it in Spanish, which is not
Right.
really talking Spanish. You know, when you
Yeah.
are speaking a language, but all you are doing is translating your own. Like I can, I can speak some Italian, but
Yeah.
all I'm doing is thinking in Portuguese or in English and translating into Italian. That's not how Italians speak. It's a different thing. So they would understand what I'm saying, but as you said, it's just a basic chat. It's not. You cannot
Yeah.
talk about anything major. Yeah. So you know some Polish. You are between Gdansk and Warsaw, and I'd like to ask you, because as someone based in Poland, you are closer to a huge conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So how does it feel to be based next door?
Yeah, that's an easy thing for me. It's a sad thing, but it's an easy thing. But when you grew up in Northern Ireland in the 80s and 90s, I mean, we had the streets were barricaded. There was bombs and guns going off every day. Poland is a peaceful country, but of course next door is Ukraine, and I have a lot of friends from Ukraine. I also felt sorry for some of my Russian friends that I've made over the years, because either they're trapped in Russia or they ended up being forced to support a regime which I personally don't support, or they had to leave and maybe even change their life, change their name, change their job, you know. So it's not easy when there's war. But you know, I have friends in Israel and Palestine as well. I have friends in Northern Ireland that are, you know, still involved in problems that we have there. So I think war is a horrible thing. And as travelers, we're trying to show that you can travel and meet people from many countries and be friends with everyone. You know, the governments may not want to be friends, but you know, a beautiful thing would be if a Ukrainian hugged a Russian person, you know, but if they bring the flag, then it looks like, oh, the Ukraine girl would hug a Russian girl with the flags together. Some people might complain about it, you know. So it's a tricky subject, of course, and we have to hope that that war will end and that the borders will be correctly made, so that the countries have their original land and their original people all together. It's a very difficult situation, that, and I'm avoiding those countries at the moment as a tourist, because if I pump money in, what will the money be spent on? And also for my own security, I don't want to be involved in that, because I've been backpacking through Africa and Asia, and I've seen people with no money, no food. And if you see people that don't have food, and another guy is able to afford a gun to kill someone, doesn't sit well with me. And a child has not even any food. So I think part of my humanity is to care for the people. The people are number one, and especially in the countries that don't have the resources that maybe Portugal or the UK has. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. So I would say the part of the Ukraine is safe, and So my girlfriend is Ukrainian.
Okay, that's
She's
why you asked the question. Okay, yeah,
that's one of the reasons, and she just got
yeah.
home. So I
Oh,
thought, okay,
is she in
before
Lviv? Which side is she in?
she she just I mean she just got home. She just got here where we
Yeah,
live.
right.
Yeah. So she's from a place called Bereksaz in
So I don't know
Hungarian,
that. I don't know
or
that.
Berehov in Ukrainian. So that's
Mhm.
right across the border with Hungary, and she's
Okay.
from Hungarian minority. Actually, she would be more Hungarian than Ukrainian,
Yeah,
like that.
that's interesting. I used to date a Hungarian girl many years ago.
He is not a
But
common thing between
yeah,
us.
well, yeah. So, but we have more than that in common with the, born in the 80s and also with the football, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So let's exactly. Let's jump into the 80s, that beautiful decade. But
Mm,
unfortunately, you and your friends, family, community went through a lot, and my memories of that are very vague.
mm,
I remember there was some um, violence, not only in Ireland or in Northern Ireland, but also in England. So,
mhm.
what are your memories from the 80s as a bloke from, is it from Bangor?
Bangor. Yeah, I
Bangor,
mean,
yeah.
this is why I've got a bit of a love for travel because I grew up by the beach in a seaside city.
Mhm.
The school I went to as a teenager was 100 meters from a beach, and if I got bored of the lessons, I just walked over to the beach and sat on a bench, and we would have it where there was violence on the streets, but the people that care about that will always care about it, and the people that don't have a different mind. And of course, I escaped and get away from that because I wanted to write about life and to be peaceful and to work in catering, to work in hotels and restaurants. And I wanted to have jobs where I was around people that were happy and having a good time. I'd rather serve someone a burger and a drink than be a policeman, for example, because I know that if you're a policeman, you're going to be involved in something that has to solve a crime. And I always wanted to be the person in a job where it's with happier people. I still admire those workers in such high level jobs like the army, the police, the fire brigade, the hospitals, and of course that I could have got a job in any of those growing up in Northern Ireland because there's a need for those workers, especially doctors. But that wasn't my dream. And of course, I didn't want to get too political with it because you can get into trouble quickly. Yeah, I don't know. I try to steer away from violence and politics on my blog, which people might be surprised about given that I grew up in it. But most of my stories on my main blog, my blog's been going 17 years now. Most of the stories on that are like about restaurants, bars, sites, drinking, crazy things to do, crossing a border, visas. I write about the important things rather than the controversial political things,
Yeah. I totally relate to that. I mean, I jump into some polemic stuff from time to time, but like this would be what I would call ramifications,
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I really care and matter for me. Like I'm way more interested in what it is at my reach, my
Yeah.
community, the people I can talk to. I'm very keen to have conversations with the person next door than
Mm.
discuss what the big sharks or the big crocodiles are talking at closed doors, because we don't really know what it is. Now, I don't mind like the debate, but I think the first thing should be us and the people we deal with on a daily basis. So you already answered why you support Bangor, and I think you already answered why you support Bournemouth, because you
I
live
don't
there.
actually support Bangor. That's the thing.
I don't.
No, that you mean for football?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No, the Bangor is my home city, but I was born in Newton Ards, which is another city. So, well, it's a nearby town, but Ards has a team and Bangor has a team. And when I was a kid, Ards they were in the top 5 in the country, and Bangor were actually the cup winners and League Cup winners one season, and 3 points off a domestic treble. I think it was 1993, Bangor FC, and a lot of my mates supported them. But my dad was born on the actual street, which is called Glentoran Street. So I support Glentoran. And that's not a good thing now because we're not we've got a lot of controversy. So I've started to go back a little bit and start supporting the local teams, which is actually my dad's old team, Dunmurry Rec. But we're playing in like the 4th division of Northern Ireland at the moment. So it's it's not something that is mainstream anymore for me. Football for me is now sort of lower level teams. Bournemouth is the exception because they're Premier League, but all my other teams I like to watch in the lower leagues now.
No, I understand that as well. Like, I started to support Cork City. Maybe you can see
Yeah, I can
the
see.
scarf there.
I've been to see them. I was at a Cork City game, and it was against Legia Warszawa in Warsaw, and it was 3-0 to Legia. I was with my mate Peter. We were having a beer during the game, and I met some fans of that club, Cork City, when they came over. I think it was 2018 or 19. It was before COVID.
Yeah. So next time you are attending a Cork City match, if you hear someone cheering for Cork with an accent that is not a Cork accent, a high chance that it's me.
It's you, yeah. There's some Polish fans there as well, I believe. Now there's some Polish guys go to Cork. I've heard. Yeah.
I never met them. Maybe I mean there are a good few. You are like I don't know how many hundreds, because Cork it's a bit like Barcelona, let's say, in the sense that it's a team that is very much about the community.
Local.
Local.
The People's Republic of Cork. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have some mates from Cork. I was backpacking with them, and I did a pub crawl in Cork one night. And I'll also tell you, one of my first biggest rock concerts I went to was in Cork. Was Oasis. 1996. I was at the Oasis gig. It was mega. And the weirdest thing is, it's still in my top 5 concerts that I've ever been to. That was in Cork.
What are the others? Because another common thing, I'm very much into rock.
Yeah. Okay. So I've seen Bob Dylan twice. I've seen Van Morrison. I've seen Manic Street Preachers. I've seen Manic Street Preachers loads. One of my favorite bands. And I've seen Thin Lizzy, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Actually, I'm wearing a T-shirt of a rock band tonight. Bizarrely, that's Therapy. Have you heard of Therapy?
No, never heard of
They're
that.
one of my bands that I love. Therapy. I saw them last year. They're from Belfast. Ballyclare and Larne. So they're a Northern Irish band, but they've been rocking for like 35 years now. That's why I like them. They're still doing what they love.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing that we have here as Ireland now. The love for music, and the love for crack and having a good time. And I think when I tell that to others, when I say others, that people that never lived in Ireland, they don't know what it is, and I don't blame them. And even if I try to transmit the atmosphere, it's very hard to say. It's something in the atmosphere. It's something that we experience, we enjoy, and you don't really have it in other parts of the world. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think the island is special for that, and I've noticed this actually, because Ireland invented the Irish pub, right? It's called Irish pub because we invented it, and pub is public house. It's just like you can come into my house for a drink if you want, but when you come into my house, I need to show you why you're there. So let's play some music, let's play some games, and as life progressed, we got televisions, we got radio, we got stereo, we got internet. So in the early days, it would have just been go to someone's house, get your guitar, get a piano, play a bit of music, sing. Even if you can't sing well, it doesn't matter. I'm not a good singer, but I can play a bit of guitar. That's enough. You can just have a little bit of crack with that. Crack open a bottle of whiskey, crack open a few beers. Just have a good time and forget about the world outside, because the world outside can be a particularly bad place. But inside a pub, the worst thing is you're damaging yourself, but nobody else. Every sip of whiskey should be bad for my liver, but that's my problem. And if I'm too drunk, they tell me to go home. That's it. So, very Irish thing. And actually, I've worked in quite a few different Irish pubs, but I think one of my other crazy stories is that in the space of 24 hours, I've worked in 2 different Irish pubs in 2 different continents on the same day. So I was working in an Irish pub in Hong Kong until 3 a.m. And then I had a flight to Sydney. I flew to Sydney on that evening before it turned midnight. So at 9 p.m. same day. I went into work in an Irish pub in Sydney. So in the space of 24 hours, and there's a time difference as well.
That's bizarre. That's very
Australia's
bizarre.
ahead. Australia's ahead of Hong Kong. So
Yeah.
I actually should have done it the opposite way, and I'd have been able to work, 2 full shifts in 24 hours. And also in between times, I had 2 pints of Guinness, at the airports on my flights. So I sort of did the full thing. I was a customer and a server twice, and I probably enjoyed it. And I wasn't tired because I'm a traveler, so I'm used to being tired, and I'm used to being traveling around the world.
Yeah, I have a similar one, but unfortunately, it doesn't involve Irish pubs or Guinness. But I had a crazy trip, crazy in terms of time difference and how much does that impact in my life as such. So once I did a around the world trip in 10 days, but only with 3 stops. Okay.
Oh wow!
So basically, so I started in Dublin. I was living in Dublin back then, and I'm in Braid, not a big difference. But anyway, I was in Dublin. So we flew to Frankfurt. Then from Frankfurt, I didn't stay there. We flew to Vancouver. Stay there for 5 days, visit some friends, explore the nature, had a few beers, saw the Portuguese community as well. And then we flew from Vancouver to Seoul.
Yeah.
Okay. So that flight, if I remember well, let's say it was 10 hours. Maybe it was a bit more. I can't remember. But what happened is Seoul is, let me get it right, Seoul is 16 hours ahead of something like that. It's a good few hours ahead of Canada.
Yeah.
Okay. Or that part of Canada.
Yeah.
And I started the trip on a Sunday around, I don't know, I think 9-10 p.m. And I only got to Seoul on Tuesday lunchtime because of the time of the flight, the duration of the flight, and the time difference. So in a sense, I was nowhere on that Monday.
You lost a day on an airplane.
I lost a day. So I'm 1 day younger.
Yeah, wow. I've done the opposite. I went from Auckland to Chile, and it was a direct flight. It was Auckland to Santiago with Air New Zealand. And when I left Auckland, it was, I can't remember the time of the flight, but let's say it was 12 midday. I left Auckland 12 midday. When I landed in Chile, it was 11 a.m. on the same day, because New Zealand was, you know the way the time difference is.
Yes.
So it was a weird one for me. And then I've been to a lot of those Pacific islands, like Nauru. I think one of my mates organizes a tour where you celebrate New Year's Eve twice. So but you get the whole day twice, because you celebrate it in, I think it's one of the one of the Kiribati Islands, like the old Gilbert Islands. You do one New Year's Eve there, and then you fly to the next island, and they're ready for their New Year.
That's a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, and also it involves a lot of confusion, because if you don't know if it's day or night, or why is it still daylight, like Iceland and Greenland and Arctic Circle, we know they have all these crazy situations where it's not even dark and it's midnight or it's 2 a.m. I mean, that just blows your mind, especially when you have cold winters growing up in Northern Ireland where it's dark at 4 p.m. some nights,
Yeah. So when I made it to New Zealand, and I think I posted on social media that I'm flying to New Zealand, because back then I had this habit of putting, you could check in on Facebook. I am at Auckland Airport. I'm at Singapore Airport, flying to Auckland. So I remember one of my friends, my Croatian friend, said, "What next? Antarctica." That is still on the list. But you were there, so I would like you to tell me, how was Antarctic for you?
Yeah, actually, I forgot to mention that. I always forget about that trip because it was it's still my favorite trip. And yeah, it's a long story. I'll try and make it short. Okay. So I was working in Australia. I got a job on a broccoli farm in Tasmania, down in the south. So basically I was chopping broccoli. I was cutting it, farming it, harvesting it. And actually I was living in a tent. And I was living very cheaply, and every week they were paying me about between $1,000 and $1,500. So if I'm not spending any money and I'm living in a tent, every week I was spending about $60 to $70. So all that money was mine. So after doing that for about 2 or 3 months, I went to check my bank account. I hadn't been to the bank for about 3 months. And I was shocked because I had loads of money that I'd never had before. And it was just around that time that me and two of my mates had got lost driving. And we ended up at the Australian Antarctic Centre that helped us find the directions or something. And I was like, hold on, Australian Antarctic Centre. Oh yeah, because the furthest south island of Tasmania, if you keep going, is Antarctica. You're there. So I sat with two mates having a beer one night on the south coast of Tasmania, just staring out to sea, watching the sunset. And I said to those two guys, I'm going to work on those broccoli farms, and I'm just going to spend all that money on a trip to just go to Antarctica. And they probably laughed. We all laughed, and nobody thought I would do it. But 6 months later, I had the money, and easily I had enough money to take time off work. I think I took 6 months off at that point. It was the longest break I've had off work. But when I say off work, I was blogging and writing while I was on that trip. So I booked the trip and I got a bargain. At the time, it was a real bargain. It was 5,000 Australian dollars for a 13-day tour of Antarctica. You can't get that. You can't get that anymore. It's the price is dear now. It's gone up. And when I got on the boat, so the boat, I had to get to Argentina on that trip. So when I got on the boat, it was 130 people. And they were all brilliant people, big travelers, all stories. So the 13 days was only 9 of it is in Antarctica, because you got 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back. And those 2 days to get there are not boring. Like, you're just looking out at sea. But the stories we share on the boat, the writing I got done, I had my laptop. I was just writing. There's no internet, of course, which is brilliant because you can just do all your writing. And of course, I had a sleep. I thought I'll catch up on some sleep. I need a bit of sleep in life. I haven't had enough sleep. And then you wake up with the sunrise, and then we're told, yeah, today we're landing in Antarctica. I mean, it's a dream place. It is a dream destination. It's beautiful. It's unbelievable. And I don't need to go back because I've seen it. I've seen it with my eyes and with my feet and my hands. I've dived in the snow and been with the penguins and got my passport stamped in Antarctica. So all of that is absolutely beautiful. It's the best trip I've done, and I recommend it.
Can you get off the boat?
Well, of course. I was off the boat for 9 days. Every day you get off. I was swimming in Antarctica.
Where do you sleep? On the boat?
You sleep on the boat. You sleep on the boat. So like, this is what happens. Generally, Vitor, this is what happens. The boat goes from Argentina, and then it anchors off an island in Antarctica. Then you get off the boat, you go and see that island. We did a hike to the top of the mountain at Couvreville. So we did, I think in those 13 days, I visited the land of Antarctica probably 10 times, because some days you have 2 landings. Some days you land at 9 a.m. on the land, you have a walk, you go to the post office. Because, there's a museum in Antarctica, there's a post office. Obviously, the capital city, McMurdo, is massive. It's, 1,000 people live there. And then you've got the penguins, the Polish. I went to the Polish base, which is awesome. I mean, they've even got a bar there, and they've got like a research unit, Chilean base. So, Antarctica, I wouldn't have gone on the trip if I don't land there, Victor. There's no way I would pay 5,000 just to see it from a window. No chance. Yeah, and I was lucky because my trip had about 10 landings. I've met people that went to Antarctica, got off the boat once and saw it, but we saw about 10 different
parts.
That's
what I heard. That's like it's mostly from the window.
Oh, I would never do that then. No, that's not my style. I'd rather stay at home and watch it on YouTube than waste 5,000 on that. So that's interesting. If you do look at my blog, which is Don't Stop Living, I've written about 30 articles in Antarctica, and some of them I wrote on the boat, and they're really not good because I haven't edited them. I was just like writing them at the time, and then we're called, oh, hey, we need to go to the land because we've just arrived on this Antarctic coast. Let's go. So I have to close the laptop, save the document, put my clothes on because Antarctica still is cold. You need to put your proper, because on the boat you're shorts and t-shirt, and then you got to get ready to go. And yeah, it's mega. It's just mega. I think my favorite place in Antarctica where we went to was Deception Island. It's very like a James Bond movie or something. The boat goes through a really narrow passage, and you look on the right and on the left, and you're almost hitting the island, and you have to go through it. And then the captain parks the boat, like anchors the boat in the middle, and it's a whaling station. You hike up a hill, and then you can swim there, because they say the reason you go swimming there is because it's the warmer water, because it's an old volcano. So we all went in to swim. It's not warmer, but it's you have to say you swam in Antarctica, so it's called a polar plunge. I mean, that was great crack. So it was.
Okay, as we come to the end, I mean, we're just talking a bit about football, and we are now at the quarterfinals. By the time this is going to be released, the Euro Cup is already finished. But we can talk here and how are we seeing, what is our prediction, our preferences. I'm curious, as a man from Bangor, how much would you and your fellows support England there?
Yeah, definitely not. No, I support Northern Ireland, and that's it. I think England are still in it. Who cares for me? But I do have friends from England. I obviously lived in Bournemouth and London and Dartford. I know them very well. Great friends of mine. But I've got friends that are Spanish. I got friends that are German, Portuguese, Turkish. So all the countries in it. I just hope that the team that wins is the best team to win in the tournament. And you're from Portugal.
And what is that team, in your opinion? So
Portugal
far?
For me are the best so far, but Spain are a real underdog, and I think Spain-Portugal would have been a good final, but the way it works, it can't happen now. So that's a bit sad that couldn't happen, especially, Spain having like a mix of young players and old players. Portugal has the same, especially with, Pepe and Cristiano Ronaldo are still playing. But I think the winner of Portugal or Spain, whoever wins of those two, should win the tournament. But we will say, who knows? It could be Turkey, it could be England. We just don't know. Who do you think, apart from Portugal, obviously? Yeah.
If I'll be biased, I'll say Portugal.
Yeah.
I think that the top performer at this point is Spain. They
scored more goals, didn't they?
Yeah, they scored more goals. They only conceded one goal, and it was an own goal.
Yeah.
They play a very attractive football. So I think the big advantage of Spain, and it is not now. I think this has been the case since ever, that all Spanish players play in Spain, so that they know each other very, very well.
Yeah.
Either they are part of the same squad, or they meet twice a year, and they get some lessons about how that defender does, how this midfielder moves around the pitch. So they have this advantage, same as the Italians.
Yeah.
Though it wasn't reflected in the pitch. Now the Portuguese, we don't have that because they are all over the place. So we don't have that. The Germans also have some key players abroad. The English they have, but the English are a weirdo team, in my opinion. So it's a different breed.
Yeah.
So I would say Spain is the top performer, but I think Germany can take advantage of the home factor, and they can be pretty confident. So that's one to take in consideration. I just want to ask you, in terms of projects, in terms of perspectives, traveling, is there anything you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, well, basically, when I started the journey, the idea was to write one book. I thought, if I can travel around the world, I'll write a book. So 2015, I landed by flight in Tunisia, and that was my 100th country. I had counted them. So I decided to release a book called Backpacking Centurion. So in other words, a backpacker who went to 100 countries, but it has a double meaning, because Centurion was a game I played as a student when I was drinking. So I decided to release a book, but it wasn't until COVID in 2020, the lockdown, I actually released that book. And when I went to release it, the publisher said, that's not one book. You've written about 4 books there. So here is now the 4th volume. So that is volume 4. Where is it there? Of Backpacking Centurion. That was my dream, was to have one book called Backpacking Centurion. I've now released 4 of them. They're all printed books. They're all available online, and I'm quite proud of that. But I thought that would be the end. Just I've done 4 books, and now I'm into the 2nd century. So this is the next century. So after the 100 countries, I've now started to write about the next 100, that's the new series. So what I'm trying to do is put all my stuff into books, release them all, and finish this journey at some point where I've seen all these countries that are in FIFA or whatever, and I want to stop and relax for a bit, settle down, and maybe have a normal life like the rest of my mates did, family, kids, car. I haven't had a car for 14 years, haven't owned one. So this sort of thing. So I guess my dream is to finish my writing, continue my blog, see the rest of the world, and chill out, really. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the viewers by now will be very interested in reading your stories, so they listen to some of it. But I think it was a great appetizer. So what I do, I put all the links in the description, and hope people can reach out to you in social media or sending an email, whatever works. So yeah, thanks very much for this conversation. I think it was great. I think that there was a lot to share. I think there's plenty of things in common. So yeah, hope we can catch up at some point. Who knows, whether in Ireland or in Poland or in other part of the world.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for the invite onto the show. Obviously, I can't wait to watch a lot of your podcasts with many of the other, interviewees, the guests that you've interviewed. And we'll meet up for a cerveja sometime.
I would prefer the Irish beer, but that's
okay. We can have a Guinness if you want. Yeah, Guinness,
yeah.
Kilkenny, Beamish. I can have a Beamish, no issue. Beamish or Murphy's, they're all good for me. So yeah, Sláinte, and I'm sure we'll catch it around the world somewhere, if not Ireland or Portugal. And all the best to your viewers. Keep the podcast going. It's brilliant what you're doing, having such a good connection with other travelers doing good things for the world rather than creating, bad things. We're trying to live a good life of peace and happiness. Yeah. So all the best, Victor. Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheers, mate. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.